Hey guys, welcome to the Choke Points. And in this video, we are going to talk about the rule based international order. Now, what exactly it is, where it came from, what are certain bodies that are there that sound like they belong to the United Nations, but they actually aren't part of the United Nations. Then, then on one side, you hear Western countries talking about rule based order, especially last year in 2024 in the Biden administration. You might have heard all this a lot, especially from Secretary of State Anthony Blinken saying that rule based international order should be followed, rule based order should be followed, all that good stuff. And then on the other side, in the eastern side of the globe, countries like Russia, China, India, global south countries, other global south, all they're saying is, oh, there should be reform in the global institutions. There should be reform in the global institutions. So, what exactly all this is, if you really want to understand what Eastern side is talking about and what the Western side is talking about, okay, you have to understand the rule based international order. For example, if I ask you, what is World Economic Forum? Who created it? Or if I ask you, what is IMF? Who created it? How it came into picture? What about the World Bank? Right? All these things. Do we have the answer to these questions? Right? And that's what I'm going to explain you in this video. And once you understand what rule-based international order is, that's when you will get a very clear picture of how the geopolitics actually works. Okay. What exactly is G20? Is it a United Nations body? What is G7? Does it even follow United Nations Charter? What is all this? Right? So that's what we are going to talk about in this video today. Okay, so please do like and subscribe. If you learn anything from this thing, please do like and subscribe, share, and feel free to use it as long as you just point it to my YouTube channel so that it helps me as well. Okay, so let's get started and let's talk about the rule based international order. Okay, so what exactly happened? The birth of rule based order. See, birth of rule based order, it goes all the way back to the ending of World War II, at the end of the World War II. And before the World War II, if you know the pre-World War II history and the post-World War II, I think it will help you understand lots of things even better. Okay. Things like, for example, World War One. Around after World War One, right around that point, the Great Depression had started. And they say that it's in 1929 or something like that. I Around that, or 1914, I believe, around that. 1914 to 1919 was the World War One, and after that, around that time, even though there is a year they say officially, but at least 2 3 decades or 4 decades were only the period of Great Depression. Why? Because of World War One, everything was banged up completely. Then we're talking about World War Two happened, right? So Great Depression and the economic depression before that. Okay, economic depression before that, it was all just uh, it was all accumulating. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that you have to understand those things. Okay, keep this in mind before we move forward. All right. Now, in 1944, so in 1944 to 1949, okay, uh 1944 Bretton Woods was announced that, okay, 44 countries got together, and then they said that, okay, in New Hampshire, they got together. They're like, okay, let's, where US basically said that if you don't want to get wagged, then dollar is the reserve currency, and everyone is going to accept it, whether you like it or not. You're gonna have to accept it. And the mechanism, the flow of whole entire dollar recycling was explained in the Bretton Woods system. It was documented and it was signed by all the countries, 44 so-called free countries. Okay. Basically, the 44 so-called free countries, either they were not colonies or the countries that actually participated in the World War II one way or the other. Okay. Now, when this was happening, then some members basically, some members said that, okay, you are saying that dollar should be the reserve currency. Then how are other countries, so-called available countries, are going to actually adopt dollar? So US leaders were at that time, they were like, okay, what do you mean available countries or whatnot? Why? Because you have to understand, available countries technically means that countries that were not colonies, but most of the countries were colonies. You have to understand this. That's when uh, the number one thing was with the Bretton Woods system. The whole point of Bretton Woods system was to impose the military power. You have to have first, you have to first establish the economic power. And to establish the economic power, you have to establish your currency. And to establish the currency as a powerful currency, where it's something that everyone is using, you have to first of all make sure that the currency that is already being used needs to go. How are you going to do that? You're going to do that by simply getting rid of uh, the system that is forcing that usage of that currency, which was dollar or the pound or pound sterling. Okay. And that's why US actually asked England, not even requested or something. It was simply ordered that you need to get rid of all these colonies, get out of there. Why? Because more the merrier. More countries use dollar, better. The US economy will be more strong, the dollar will become, right? That is the way. That's what basically done at that time. Carrot and stick. So at that time, US was using its stick, that listen to me or else. Okay. So England was forced to basically remove all its colonies, get out of there. Okay. And this is why between 1944 to 1949, lots and lots of countries were basically, they got rid of their colonies. All right. And some became part of the Commonwealth, some got freedom as a dominion, and then lots of other countries basically came out as a independent sovereign nations. Now, then the second question was asked in that conference in the Bretton Woods was that, hey, all these countries that where the colonies are going to be gone, or colonization will end, how these countries are going to get the dollar, how they're going to really survive without dollar, because I mean, colony has basically, you know, sucked them dry. There's nothing left. So what do we do? So, so you was like, okay, let's think about it. And the mechanism was put in place where IMF and World Bank was born. Now you have to understand this thing that IMF and World Bank both were founded in what, 1944, and earlier in 1945, but before United Nations was formed. Okay, you have to understand this. Once this was established, then United Nations was formed. When actually, if they really meant something, then they could have actually created United Nations first, and then could have created IMF and World Bank. But that wasn't done. Why? Because if they would have done that, then in the United Nations, lots of countries would have been there to contend and to oppose the whole entire dollar mechanism too. So nobody, chances was that countries were going to oppose it, and they were not going to use dollar as the reserve currency at that point. Okay. So that's why IMF, World Bank, all these systems were put in place before the United Nations was created. All right. Then 1945, the legal framework was created, which was called United Nations, and United Nations had a charter, which was a rule book or a legal framework that was supposed to be followed, and that was governed and maintained by the Security Council. Now, Security Council has two bodies. One is Permanent Security Council, which is P5 that we call, and then other one is Temporary Security Council, which is 2 years, I believe, the membership term is. And after 2 years, there is election, and and then there are temporary members are re-elected. Okay, but the permanent members are still there. The P5 are still there, and those P5s basically they veto, do all that. But basically, those P5s are sitting there. They do everything except for what United Nations was formed for. They just fight with each other, among each other. That's what they're like. Okay, let's create a ring, and then we are gonna fight with each other for no reason. That's what's happening in P5. Okay, in P5, what Russia, China. Then on the other side, you have UK, France, and US. And all they do is just argue, fight, never come to any kind of consensus, and that's it. They don't even use that P5 to their own advantage, quite frankly. Okay, they never use P5, I mean the whole Security Council, to their own advantage. Okay, they don't do that. They just do not do any kind of those things. They just use that, you abuse the whole entire system. All right, doesn't matter the country. Now, then in 1947, general agreement on tariffs and trade was formed. Now, what happened now? Yeah, now you look at the mechanism, understand this. First of all, reserve currency is established. A mechanism is put in place to recycle that reserve currency, which is dollar. Now, the third thing was that, okay, now we have all the framework or foundation laid. Now, what do? We come up with a mechanism so that we control the trade and so that we can trade with other countries in dollar. So they came up with the body called General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. The purpose of GATT was simply that, okay, if two countries, what they were saying is that let's have a uniform tariff and trade rules between the two countries. Meaning that, let's say, if US is not applying any kind of tariff on a particular goods or import, then other countries should do the same and not apply tariff on those type of goods. That's what the whole idea was. And then there are other things in it too. But later on, what happened, that as the Western trade grew, they changed this whole entire thing to what you call World Trade Organization in 1995, and which is also a system that is outside of the United Nations. It doesn't follow United Nations Charter. Now, now think about it. Okay, it's all step by step process. Okay, step by step process. Now you think about the GATT. What happened? GATT was called World Trade Organization when in 1995. Okay, Soviet Union collapsed when 1991. Okay, so right after all that happened, every body was being formed one at a time. All right, now you have a reserve currency, you have a mechanism in place. Now you have the trade and all that set up, that how we are going to trade. But now the question was really, oh, we have UN too. And during that time, United States faced a major problem, that they got involved into other wars too. Vietnam War, then Korea War, this war, that war, all kinds of wars. Okay, because they had by the end of World War II, they had established that that military industrial complex need to be fed. It's a, oh, you can call it, it's a beast that need to be fed to be kept alive. Okay, so they needed to feed it. That's number one thing. Okay, second thing they realized is that because of United Nations, chances are that countries, once again, like I said earlier, may not follow these orders. For example, oh, dollar, I'm not gonna use trade, I'm not going to trade in dollar. In right after World War II, technically, actually, countries were not jumping the ship into the dollar and start trading in dollar. That wasn't happening. You have to understand this. Okay, now all this was established, so they were like, okay, now what do we do? How do we make sure that our trade security, currency security, and little bit of firepower security too. So they created NATO. Once again, you need an enemy to convince your general population or the local politics. What was that local politics? Local politics was, or said, domestic policy politics. They created an enemy called Soviet Union. Okay, after fighting together in World War I and World War II, they call Soviet Union enemy. Somehow, Soviet Union became enemy. The country who defeated Germany, uh, all of a sudden became the enemy. And why they became enemy is this is an unwritten rule. Like if you start to do some research on it and start to read papers on it, what you find is the ultimate conclusion is that one of the many reasons that Soviet Union and US actually became enemy was because US took all the gold during the World War II. After the World War II, all the German gold and everything, they just took it. And Soviet Union basically got the hand on their rocket technology and other technologies. Okay, this is why if you look at it, then even though US had all the German scientists, all the top German scientists that were there, but US couldn't actually build the rocket until 1969 that could actually do something useful. Okay, but Russians, right after all that thing, they launched the rocket in the space. They had one first man walk in the space. All that thing they did, right? So where they lacked, they couldn't capture the gold. The whole the part of the deal was that okay, US is going to they are going to share the gold, but that never happened. Okay, so first of all, so once again, dollar was established, banks, loaning body, all that was established, then trade was established so that the trade in dollar can be done. And then to enforce that trade, NATO was created on the name of what? Soviet Union as an enemy. Okay. So by 1950, the global order by the 1950, the global order had two pillars. One was United Nations Charter, that was the law, and Bretton Woods plus NATO plus GATT rules. Okay, so there was dual systems were already started to function. All right, and this is how the rule-based order was actually born. All right. Now the question really is again. The next question is that what about IMF? What about World Bank? What about World Trade Organizations? Like I said earlier, these are the bodies that were created to basically serve the interest of the West. They were never created to serve the West interest of the global population or something. Okay, and that's why IMF's, if you look into it, IMF's terms and conditions are mainly uh, they are enforced by Uncle Sam. Then World Bank, same thing. Uh, uh, World Trade Organization the same way. Okay, so this is how basically these things were. All right, now let me show you a few other things. Something very interesting. All right, so something interesting would be like this: that um, major global bodies people think are part of United Nations, but they actually are not. For example, IMF. This is a US led quota system. US veto, World Bank, US selects the president, WTO, US, United, European Union, Japan trade dominance. Okay, then you have BIS, G10 central banks. Okay. Then G7, it's also not UN body, which is Western bloc. G20 is also not a United Nations body. It is mixed, but Western led agenda. For a long time, it did. Okay. Then OECD, the same way. SWIFT, Western bank regulators. Okay. ICON is the body that controls the DNS. That's not even the that's not a United Nations body. This is just an independent body, and its origin is in US. It is the DNS authority that basically meaning that the whole entire internet that actually works globally that you see today is because of this icon right here. Okay. Then you have World Economic Forum. Okay, World Economic Forum is nothing but a private Swiss NGO in which lots of Democrats are actually members, and they before all this, USAID used to fund this World Economic Forum. Okay, and lots of, I would say, globalists and your politicians, they fund it, and then their retirement and everything else is set through the World Economic Forum. Every time you see an NGO, just so you know, it's nothing but a money laundering scheme, which is money laundering scheme made legal. All right. Now, Icon, look at this. The entire global internet infrastructure is dependent on what? This one body that nobody controls. Think about it. Yes, up until now, uh, it's all good because nothing bad is happening. But this thing can actually change the internet, whole entire internet. Okay, if you don't believe me, go look into the DNS bug actually, which was found in around 2003 or 2005 time frame. Okay, what happened with that? The bug was actually uh, that, and I'm gonna give you some rough idea, okay, because even I don't remember. But what happened was the Citibank's site were hacked, Google was hacked, and all these were hacked. So they were like, okay, what exactly is going on here? Nobody understood what exactly is going on. And then they realized there's a secret meeting, because these things are very important, right? So secret meetings happen, and they found out that actually IPv4 world was running out of IPv4 IPs. So they were like, okay, as the world runs out of IPv4, we are gonna run into this problem more and more, meaning that one bad entity can actually compromise the whole entire DNS, and they can capture anything. That's why they came up with the whole idea of IPv6 blocks. Okay, so you got to look into it. But point is that icon can become a single point of failure for future. All right, now let's talk about the rule based international order and its evolution as to how actually um, it came to this point, what we a point or the situation that we are in today. Okay, so let's look at the chronological stuff. Okay, from 1945 to 1991, there was a Cold War duality that was going on. We both know what it was. The two rival systems emerged: the US led order, NATO, Bretton Woods institution, and the Soviet led order, COMCON, and Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact and all, basically, that formed the Soviet Union. Okay, the COMCON, or the Council of Mutual Economic Assistance, was an economic organization founded in 1949. Okay, by the Soviet Union and the socialist countries to facilitate trade and development within the Eastern Bloc. That was the whole idea. All right. Then, after the fall of Soviet Union on December 26, 1991, it left that void on the Eastern Bloc, and then the US came out as a sole superpower. Okay, and the World Trade Organization was founded in 1995, consolidating global trade under Western designed rule. That's why the General Agreement on Trades, Tariffs, and Trades was actually named to World Trade Organization, just to unify the Western trading system and the Eastern trading system into one, under one umbrella, or one umbrella of rule-based international order, that was, and it was called World Trade Organization. Okay, so, and that's when you started to see that gold prices were established by the London Bullion. Then grain prices were being established by other bodies, something in United States. Then you started to see lots and lots of currency exchanges were being traded all over the place, mainly under US terms and conditions, right? That's all those things you started to see. Then NATO expanded eastward at that time, but as soon as Soviet Union um, disintegrated, immediately NATO started to expand eastward towards the Soviet Union. Now the goal was for them was to actually capture any and every possibility, basically to end any and every possibility of the formation of Soviet Union again. Why? Because those socialist countries that were part of Soviet Union, the goal was to actually merge them into NATO. So this way, Russia, Soviet Union can never come up. Okay, Kamkan needs to die. Why? Because they don't want any rival trading system. Rival trading system meaning that there will always be a rival currency. And if there is a rival currency, then there will always be a rival military power. And if there is always a rival military power, then you cannot have your hegemony anywhere. Okay. So it's all related. Okay. You have to understand this. It's all related one at a time. It was all created under certain strategy. Okay. What you, like I said, what you're told on a piece of paper through the media or something else is not exactly the thing. They never tell you the underlying reasoning behind it. They always tell you what they are going to do. This is what is being done, blah, blah, blah. NATO is being formed, but and this many countries will be there, blah, 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 all that. Okay. And then just to answer the Soviet Union is threat, this, that, we will make sure that that's why we are forming the NATO. Okay. But it's never one particular reason. You have to understand that. All right. Now, so after all this was established, the rule-based international order was projected as a global standard and which was often enforced without UN authorization. And there are lots and lots of cases of it. Okay, lots and lots of cases. For example, look at the Iraq War. Nobody knows. Nobody ever found WMDs over there. Balkan states problems. Then there are many other sanctions, US sanctions that have been applied. Look at Libya, Sudan. Then you had Jordan. Jordan was also part of that thing once. Then Egypt also same thing. Then you have Lebanon. Okay, all these places were part of this. Okay, so and those and all that was nothing but RBIO, or rule based international order imposition. Okay. And that's why Saddam Hussein died. That's why Gaddafi died, because Gaddafi wanted something else. Saddam Hussein wanted something else. Saddam Hussein basically traded in euro for some time. Okay. After the creation of the petrodollar system. All right. So the petrodollar, see, now here 1991 to 2008. But what I am now haven't told you in from between 1945 to 1991, a couple of other important things happened too. Okay, and one of those things was 1973 oil embargo, and then after that 1975 G7. G7 is also not a United Nations body. It does not follow any United Nations charter. Okay, even though they expect BRICS to follow that charter, but they don't follow their own charter. Okay, they don't follow that charter themselves. Just like US talks about ICJ, International Court of Justice, but they're not part of, they're not signatory of ICJ. They don't recognize ICJ, but they will expect other countries to arrest President Vladimir Putin when time comes, or whatever. All right, that's where the problem is. That's what the rule-based international order is meant to do. All right, now, and then after 1975, we all know what happened. And in between in 1973, your petrodollar was established, that okay, we are going to go with dollar, no gold backing, we're done. Nixon did that, right? Why was it? Nixon didn't do all that just out of the blue. Nixon did all that thing under a proper plan. The plan was very simple. They removed dollar backing, and then what they were going to do is that they're going to peg everything to the oil. That's what the whole thing was. It was the plan all along. That's why G7 was formed. Now you have to think about it. All these things were done step by step. Okay, and since then, that's what G7 has been trying to do. Okay, and then they wagged Iraq, because Saddam tried to sell oil in euro. Okay, you have to understand, he sold oil in euro for six straight months. He did. All right, and after that they took out Saddam Hussein, and uh, and the rest is history. Then same thing happened in Libya as well. All right, now then comes the 1991 to 2008. We talked about it. All right. Then, oh, yeah, there you go. So 2008 to 2020 were very challenging. What happened? From 2008 is actually 2008 is the period when the whole entire dollar system that was there, it came under scrutiny and its legitimacy was under challenge. Why? Because when the 2008 financial crisis its foundation was laid in 90s, actually, under the 1998 or around that time frame. I can't remember exactly, but in 90s, when Bill Clinton was president. All right. So what Bill Clinton did is that he changed certain regulation, and I'm going to talk about this whole entire economic crisis as well in a detailed podcast, probably sometime in coming weeks. Okay, I will do that. That is going to be a very interesting podcast because that's one aspect of 2008 economic crisis that nobody talks about. All right. What Bill Clinton did is that he had said in his election campaign that housing for all. Okay. He raised this slogan. He said, the housing for all, we are going to give everybody a house. Now, housing for all, he did say that, but how are you going to manage that? How are you going to keep that promise? Because it's not like he's stupid. He knew that exactly that it's not even possible. Okay, because when you start to do the whole socialist thing, it's going to create problems. And because he wanted to do this whole housing for all, he created these regulations. Not created regulations, but actually he relaxed lots and lots of regulations that were going to put checks and balances on the mortgage risks. Mortgage risk meaning that you cannot give the loan to uh, risky customers that can be flight risk, customers that cannot afford to pay mortgage and all that. So the he removed those regulations that were actually meant to manage the risk, okay, optimize the risk. And when all that was done, then any Tom, Dick, and Harry was could go and just get the credit request processed and all that, and would get the loan for buying a house. At that time, it was all good and gravy, and they showed in their budget, they showed surplus budget. Surplus budget. What's interesting is that people what and Democrats basically advertised it as a look. It was surplus budget. The economy was doing so great. Well, if economy was doing so great, then why economy is collapsing now? Isn't that what it is right now? That you have almost $8 trillion of surplus dollars sitting in the market, doing nothing. What you think the problem is? So what they don't understand is the basic principle, the supply and demand. When you have more money, the moment you show surplus budget, then that means that you had money that was not used properly and it is sitting and it's not doing anything. You're blocking it. That's what surplus money means. And sure enough, at that time, it all looked good, but all that accumulated over the period. Okay. Then came the boom, dot com burst. And then after that, that even actually because of the dot com burst, what happened is that lots and lots of people lost their jobs and things started it were brewing inside. Okay. And in 2008, it all exploded. Okay. And immediately all the domestic banks and mortgage companies, they all started to scramble to manage the crisis, to hedge their all the risks that were there. And to do so, what they had to do was they had to make sure that their money that is within the United States, it does not go out of the country. Now if money is not going out of the country, then what's happening? Meaning that a country that said in 1944 that yeah, we will give you the dollar, trade with us in dollar, this that is going to be a serious problem, because by that time international system was very much tied to the dollar. So they could not figure out what to do but to block the countries. Okay. And lots of assets were seized, blocked, dollar was not being printed, was not going out of the country at all. And that's when President Obama, he said that okay, let's start the currency swap system. Currency swap system meaning that if a country has enough dollar, they can actually swap this thing with among each other and all that thing. So that's when the first step, you can say a legitimate step, that was to initiate the de-dollarization was started. Okay. And it was started by the Democrats. And in America, it de-dollarization technically never started outside America, it started in America. Okay. So, and then when uh, all these countries saw these problems, that's when report came out that we have if there are BRIC countries are there. These countries, what was that? Daniel O'Neill, I think I can't remember his name. Daniel, the BRICS, the guy who coined the term BRICS. So he was from the your Morgan Stanley. Uh, so he said this thing, and BRICS countries were like, "Hey, thank you for the idea. Let's form BRICS." And then 2009, BRICS was formed, and they started from the day one. They were like, "Okay, we need reforms in the global governance. This is not the right way to do it." And then came China, initiated its Belt and Road Initiative. China realized that, okay, we have had enough of this. No more WTO and this and that. Now we are going to infiltrate into all these systems, and we are going to establish our own order. And the BRI was born too. So, and then by this time, okay, between this time frame from 2008 to 2020, the Western led interventions in Libya, Syria, Yemen, basically it all exposed the selective application of these so-called rules. All right. And that's when the legitimacy was challenged. All right. Then 2020 to 2025, what happened? COVID came, and when COVID came, all of a sudden we started to see how the problem started. Problem started because entire supply chain collapsed. Nobody could do anything. Countries in Africa and all, they immediately went with crypto. They were like, okay, crypto is the best way. Or and then Africa also decided to go with your digital currencies. Okay. And today, now 164 countries are actually either testing or in pilot or whatnot. They have it in their digital currency is in place. Like for example, Nigeria, Bahamas, all these countries have their CBDCs in place. Okay. And that's what the whole entire world order changed from a hard currency to a digital currency system. Why? Because if you during the COVID time, even giving a hard $100 bill like that was risky. Why? Because you could get COVID. And there were certain bad elements in the society who were actually spitting on those bills and then giving it to somebody else. So there are lots of sadists too. Okay. And then came, uh, so from that point on, uh, things started to take a U turn or go completely in a different direction for rule based international order. Why? Because the whole entire trading system collapsed because of COVID. Now, we don't know if COVID was caused to collapse this whole entire system on purpose or what. Why? Because you need something of this magnitude to actually change or basically, undermine an order that was established. All right. So, so COVID-19 basically did the thing. And then after that, the weaponization, serious weaponization of dollar we saw, which happened in 2022 against Russia. And when that happened, Russia started to push for what? De-dollarization, complete de-dollarization. Okay. Across Eurasia, Asia, South Asia, everywhere. Why? Because it was COVID. Countries didn't want to, if you don't have dollar, if you have entire supply chain collapse, why would you want to use dollar and all that? Because dollar at the end of the day was paper anyways. So all these countries were like, okay, no, let's trade in national currencies, guys. Let's trade with each other. Like I will give a simple example. For example, let's say India. India has neighboring countries, small neighboring countries. Okay, like Bangladesh is there, Sri Lanka is there. Then you have Maldives is there. Then there are a few other Indonesia, Malaysia. All these countries are there, right? And there is one terrorist country. Okay, we all know the name of that terrorist country. Now, um, so So now, why I'm saying this? Because all these countries, other countries like Sri Lanka's economy collapsed during the COVID, right? Why? Because Sri Lanka's entire economic structure dependent on tourism. Malaysia, the same, not Malaysia, but more your Maldives, same way. economic structure heavily dependent on what? Tourism. It collapsed, right? So countries started to realize this thing, and that's when they were like, okay, no, only way to counter this whole entire thing is trade in national currencies. Okay, trade in national currencies meaning that you need to reform the international trading system, and for that, if and considering the World Trade Organization was never part of United Nations, so that's why BRICS countries started to expand among each other. They were like, okay, let's trade in national currencies through our own body we call BRICS. That's when SCO was there too. SCO got active as well. Okay, so all these things happen, and then in 2023, what happened? A biggest slap on the whole entire thing was done by adding African Union into G20. Okay, India showed African continent the power of unity. That hey, work together as a combined entity and you will have everything. The combined GDP of African Union is $3.2 trillion, and you need to have a $3 trillion, or actually what, $1 or $2 trillion of GDP or something along those lines in order to be part of G20. When African Union said that hey, we have GDP of 3.2 trillion, India said that okay, welcome to the club, and African Union became part of uh, the G20 group, and and they institutionalized mainly the strongest body of the global South. Okay, and that was basically done. And all these years, Africa was never recognized for its contribution to the world, when actually Africa was feeding the entire Western economic ecosystem through its raw materials, through its trade of trade, human trafficking. You know that all these things that are done in Africa, the regime changes, then the political unrest, all these things. That's when actually they do all this human trafficking for organs and all that too. You have to understand that lots and lots of things go on behind the scenes. Okay. So now what? Now all this we talked about, now let's talk about the rule-based international order and difference between the UN Charter. Now, and I'm just gonna cover it briefly, okay? The UN Charter basically it was established in 1945, and and uh, and this is the world's legal foundation, all right, where all the countries they agree to the system. Okay, the rule based order is actually it's not a treaty, it's not a written international law. It's just that whenever, and it does not follow any order. Mainly you can say that G7, I would say G7 comes close to the rule based international order body or something, if there is any such thing. Okay, or and that whole entire rule based international order basically from the time to time, whenever G7 wants to say that hey, follow our rules or else, then they say rule based international order. That's what it is, the whole entire thuggery basically. Okay, now, and lots of things are there. Okay, we can go on and on about it. Then uh and all the BRICS countries basically they are saying that no, we're not going to follow your thing, IMF or your World Bank or uh, World Trade Organization. So that's when this is why BRICS says that we want the reform in the institution, the institute, the global institutions. They are not saying that reform in the United Nations. I said there should be certain reforms in the Security Council when it comes to the United Nations. But they are saying BRICS is saying that there should be reform in the what? In the World Trade Organization, in IMF, in your World Bank, all these bodies. That's what they're saying. That's why, if you notice, to counter IMF and World Bank, they created NDB, National Development Bank, that where they are pouring money over and over and over. Okay, and then they to counter the trade and all. BRICS has its own trading body. Now they have their own grain exchange, they have their own gold exchange and all that too. So BRICS countries are trading among each other in their national currencies. Russia and China, almost 95 to 96% trade happens in national currencies. India and Russia, 95% trade is in national currencies. China and India have already done trade in national currencies, but I think as if the relationships improve, probably it's gonna grow. Then India has lots of 30 other countries where they're trading in national currencies, and lots of them are BRICS countries. Okay. So that's what BRICS is saying. When BRICS says that reforms in the institutions, global institutions, that's what they mean. Okay. So now, so reform and all that reform and all talk of was because all that talk happened because of the weaponization of the dollar. Okay, all these years when they started to weaponize the dollar, then uh, then other countries started to lose interest in dollar. Why? Because why would you want that, right? So US dollar account right now, it is like around 57%, 57, 58% global reserve, and it used to be 71% in 2000, and after that it is 58% now. Okay, and then 90% of the global trade flows through dollar clearing system based in the United States now. uh, and we all know what exactly happened in the weaponization, right? So this is why countries have moved away from the dollar too. All right. And these are some of the things that you are seeing: the currency swap, dollar dumping, dollar de-dollarization, trade in national currencies. All these terms have come out too in past couple of years. All right. That simply means that they are challenging the rule-based international order. They're not challenging United Nations. You have to understand this. They're not challenging United Nations. Okay, they are just challenging the rule-based international order. There is a difference. All right. Now, and then other reason for challenging all these things was that uh, they became the rule-based international order was uh, applied all over for global policing. Okay, see, there are some things I can understand. For example, you when you want to establish the trade, then you want to make sure that there is a trade security, like for example pirate situation, right? So you want to make sure that those trading lanes are secure. Nobody's going to rob the trade and disrupt the supply chain, right? Then so but all that was not the case. Lots of situations were simply because it had, a coin has two sides, right? So one aspect is that yes, you want to make sure that trade security, supply chain security, logistics are robust and this and that. But at the same time, rule-based international order was saying that hey, we control all these things, and if you don't listen to us, we are going to block you from it. Okay. And blockade was done through what? Through the insurance that is applied. If the most of the shipping insurance companies are Western countries, in Western countries, okay, because all these banks were that established, that's what they did. So all that was part of the plan. All right. Look at Russia, for example. Russians don't have any port authority right now in South America. That's why they cannot trade in South American ports like that. So they have to go through other countries through the land routes and this and that. But they were asking US to remove that sanction. So that's a different story, though. Okay. But global policing basically comes United States. Basically, it maintains 192 military bases. Lots of people say 800 military bases, but I think that just because you are drying your underwear somewhere doesn't mean it becomes a military base. All right. and uh, and the entire NATO's military budget goes up to 1.3 trillion dollars, mostly contributed by the US. Right, Afghanistan war cost NATO almost 2.3 trillion dollars, because I still remember George Bush Senior actually allocating trillions and trillions of dollars each year just for the war, when actually it was nothing but everyone was just money laundering it. Lots and lots of companies, they became people and companies, they became filthy rich during the Afghanistan war. So So global, so RBI basically, when they started to interfere in and into global and started this global policing and all, that's also created a problem too. It interferes with the sovereignty, right? So that was another aspect of it. Now, and because of all this, world moved to what? World moved to multipolarity. And because of all the things that were going on, the illegal things, the BRICS basically started to take over. And BRICS said that no, we are going with the multipolarity. We are going to expand, we are going to invite more and more countries. So you have to understand that even though there are only 10 full members and 10 partner countries, so 20 countries overall part of the BRICS, but there are almost 50, 40, 50 plus countries that actually show interest in BRICS, and they go into BRICS related events and activities. Even countries like Mexico and all, they go over there too. Okay. So so now BRICS came up. Now BRICS, by purchasing power parity wise, BRICS supersedes. BRICS is higher than G7. BRICS has beaten G7 already. Then it comes to nominal GDP within 5 years, it's gonna do that too. Then BRICS thing is that BRICS produces 44% of all the grains and everything, and their consumption is all 44%, which is a great thing because whatever you produce, you consume. So you really don't have to worry about exporting your stuff. So you're not taking any loss, everything. So you have your own economic system established. Okay. BRICS has its own grain exchange, BRICS has its own gold exchange, BRICS is working on its own digital currency system too. So they are working very fast to replace the whole entire RBIO in few years. Okay? And that's how the world will transition from rule based international order to multipolarity. But that multipolarity is going to follow what? It's going to follow the United Nations Charter. Okay? The law, not some random rule created by some random thing. Okay? This is it for this video, guys. It was 52 minutes, 24 seconds. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And I tried my best to make it engaging. Please do like and subscribe. And I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.